This question from Ben on X to kick off with. What's going on at RB Leipzig? A 5-1 battering at home to Wolfsburg. What's happening?
Well, they could be changing coach quite soon, I think it's fair to say. Now, they got a 3-0 win in the Cup this week, a huge game against Eintracht Frankfurt, who are currently second in the league. They really needed that to go through to the DFB Pokal quarterfinals. Of course, they've done very well in the Pokal in recent years. They won it the year before last when Leverkusen won it. That maybe has kept Marco Rosa going for the moment. We've already made a change upstairs. Ruven Schröder, the sporting director, he's moved on, but he's moved on not because he's been binned by Red Bull to help out at one of the other Red Bulls. So he's gone to Salzburg to be sporting director there, where he's going to support Pep Lijnders, who's having quite a difficult time there, the former assistant to Jurgen Klopp, of course. Now, the fact is, we'll come back to Klopp in a minute, because I think this is really interesting. But in terms of Leipzig, they have missed Dani Olmo big time. There's no doubt about that. They've also had Xavi Simons out for the last little while, which has been more important, I think, because if you look at the fact that they're able to bring in Antonio Nusa, the Norwegian, who's been really good this season, not like for like for Olmo by any stretch of the imagination, but as Marco Rosa was explaining, we had the opportunity to get him because we had the money for Olmo, and he's done really well. Benjamin Šeško has looked the part this season. I'd be very surprised if he stayed at Leipzig beyond next summer. And Loris Openda's still Loris Openda. So I think you look at the issues. Firstly, the midfield ones. They're lacking not only Xavi Simons, but Xaver Schlager, who's a long-term injury victim and is someone who protects that defence. So I think that's really important. They look a bit shapeless in the middle of the park. And, you look at this game against Wolfsburg, who they shouldn't be losing at home to. They shouldn't be losing 5-1 at home to. And they shouldn't be conceding 2 goals in the first 5 minutes or 2 in the space of 75 seconds, which is what happened. And I think those personnel problems are an issue. I would still back them to get out the other side of it. The problem is it's changed the feeling around the whole season. Because a month ago, they're level on points with Bayern. Now they're 9 points behind and, to all intents and purposes, out of the title race. They go into like each season at the moment thinking, well, maybe we could challenge for the title this season. And they're not managing it. And I think what's happened at Leverkusen last season particularly has put a lot of pressure on Leipzig and Dortmund. It's like, well, if Bayern aren't going to win it, why aren't we ready to receive? And I think Leipzig have always been quite critical. Coaches have always tread a certain line. And Marco Rosa is their longest serving top flight coach. And, they've only been in the top flight coming up 9 years. So that shows you how high expectation is there, even if from the outside we look at them as a sort of development club. The other question is, when we're talking about the coach, well, ever since Jurgen Klopp got the Red Bull job, which is all a bit, touchy-feely, long distance, definitely doesn't involve any coaching. Obviously, the effect this has is every time a coach from the Red Bull network is under pressure, so be it Pep Lijnders, be it Marco Rosa, there's always going to be speculation about, well, maybe they'll parachute Jurgen Klopp in for the short term. So there's a potentially huge story there, and it makes it an even more intense pressure for the likes of Marco Rosa.
You intrigued?
Yeah, of course. I've always found Leipzig intriguing. It's one of those situations where they're not a club that you are naturally inclined to cheer for because of the whole setup of it and the feeling of inauthenticness as you feel as a fan. But it doesn't mean it's not an intriguing situation to follow the detail of why that model will or won't work. And I think that the Leverkusen example that Andy brings up is really relevant. I think that happens all the time in countries where you get one club that breaks out of where it's supposed to be, and then all the other ones look around and go, oh, it is possible. Well, why can't we do it?
What about the Jurgen Klopp bit?
Yeah, obviously, Klopp's presence makes it more intriguing. That was exactly what I was about to say. When you've got these it's tricky because as a journalist, you don't want to fall into it. But we do live in this era, and I feel like I talk about it a lot on this podcast, this era of football being much more about superstar individuals than it is about teams and those are the brands that matter. Those are the brands that matter to the audience. Those are the brands that matter to, I think, especially younger fans. And so, yes, the next chapter of Jurgen Klopp is a chapter that's interesting to us. The role that he's going to have and what impact he's going to have, all of that is a fascinating picture. And I think that tied together with this impatience that things always have to happen right away is fascinating. And also, I don't know, I can't think of quite what the right word is for it. It can feel quite unedifying. I think that's the word I'm looking for.
That's not a bad word.
Yeah.
That's not a bad word.
I love unedifying as a word. Very at home in modern football.
I thought when I learned how to spell it that I should use it 3 or 4 times in my English O level. For those
that's how it works, isn't it? Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
It's a very unedifying Shakespearean passage you've asked us.
It's a very unedifying exam.
This from Nathan on email, though. Well, a lot of teams will feel for Sporting, I suppose, because he says, after their first loss of the season, a shock home defeat to Santa Clara, is Ruben Amorim's absence already affecting Sporting Lisbon?
Well, it's hard not to draw that conclusion, even if it's a very short term one.
Because they hadn't lost, have they? They hadn't lost all season.
No, they'd won all their games.
Well, you've got to point to that.
We were just talking about Leipzig and Wolfsburg. There is no way on all of the green earth that Sporting should be losing at home to Santa Clara. So Santa Clara are a small team who've done very well to stabilise themselves in top flight over the last couple of years after coming back after a long absence. But they're just a small island club from the Azores. They are a satellite club at Benfica at one point, which is why they basically have the same badge as Benfica on their kits. And, there's a massive difference in terms of talent, resource, etc., etc., etc. The thing is about this is you can look at the numbers and say they had loads of possession, shots, etc., etc. If you actually watch the game, Gabriel Batista, the Santa Clara goalkeeper, didn't really have that much to do. And when you've got the amount of attacking talent that Sporting have, like quite apart from the fact that they have the better team, that shouldn't be happening. I wonder if part of it was the fact that they're absolutely hammered by Arsenal in the week before that. That's a feeling that they're not used to feeling. You had Morten Hjulmand, the captain, coming out and saying, look, I don't care if it's against Arsenal or whoever it is. A club like us should not be losing 5-1 at home in a European game. Now, funnily enough, if you go back to when they returned to the Champions League under Amorim, one of the first results in that 5-1 loss at home to Ajax. And they managed to respond to that and get past it, even though they were absolutely disgraced that night. They managed to get past it. And I think that's what they need to do. Like, there are already questions over João Pereira, of course, because he's not managed a senior team before. He's come up from Sporting B, very close to Amorim. Basically, what they're trying to do is much like when André Villas-Boas left Porto, they're trying to keep the magic in the bottle by getting someone who's already in the firm to keep it all going. That's difficult because he's not experienced. And I guess the question is, how much can Porto and Benfica make the most of it? They both won to close the gap this weekend. For Benfica, Bruno Lage has made a difference, and Angel Di Maria is playing unbelievable football at the moment. He scored 6 in the last 3 games, and he looks like not only the best player in the league, he looks like one of the best players in Europe the way he's playing at the moment, though that is a small sample size, of course. With Porto, they'd had a bad little run, but because they won at the weekend against Casapia, they are back in a position to put pressure on Sporting as well. And that, I guess that is the problem, because João Pereira is taking over mid-season, and he's taking over a team where excellence is assumed. Like there is no way at the start of this season, Benfica have improved since Bruno Lage took over. Porto had a good start to the season, but none of them could touch Sporting because Sporting are perfect. So keeping them perfect, it's almost impossible, really.
I think there's like one other thing with Pereira is this slightly awkward situation about him not actually officially being able to be the manager, right? Because
not having the license.
Yeah, because he hasn't got the pro license. And
it definitely affects you authority-wise, I think.
Yeah, well, as I understand it as well, because it does feel like, even though that's the law of Europe, it feels like how that is applied can vary a bit from country to country. And I know Amorim actually early in his career had to do like a full year suspension because he was not officially the manager of I can't remember the club he was at the time, but
it was Casapia actually.
Yeah. And he that was because he was caught giving instructions during a game, basically. And so what an odd position to be in when everyone knows you're the manager, but you can't give instructions during a game. It's got to be disruptive to your coaching, at least to some level.
And Amorim has promised not to raid the talent of Sporting, to allow them
in January.
Yeah, well,
it's very specific about
I was
that.
coming up for this season to allow them to win the league. But no, it's just the question has a lot of consequences, potential consequences. Because if Manchester United are waiting to sign any Sporting players and Sporting aren't going to win the league anyway, you may as well, not bother waiting till the summer. I'm just
charge them more in January as well.
I'm sure they will. Yeah. From James on Instagram, after taking his chance amid an injury crisis at Real Madrid, is Raúl Asencio doing enough to keep his place in the team upon the return of Dani Carvajal?
I guess it's a question you have to split into two parts, really, because Asencio, no relation to Marco, by the way. There's a slight difference in the spelling, you might notice. He has been catapulted into this situation because Real Madrid have had so many injuries at the back. Is unbelievable, of which Carvajal is only really the tip of the iceberg. Now, he's not really a direct replacement for Carvajal. Carvajal's a right back. Asencio's a centre back, albeit an often right-sided centre back. I can see why you maybe would make a comparison, because one of the notable things of Asencio since he's come into the team, his passing over distance and his ability to switch it from one wing to another is something that could turn into a real asset for Real Madrid. The thing that's impressed me the most about him actually was his performance in defeat at Liverpool, Nicky, because he, in that game, not only was playing the team that are probably the best team in Europe at the moment, and I think he was Real Madrid's best defender on the night. On the back of no experience, by the way, just being dropped into the first team because there are no other options, and they've got Fede Valverde at right back, etc., etc. The fact that Darwin worked very hard on winding him up and getting him into trouble, and he was able to turn the other cheek and get on with his game.
Yeah, which is no small thing. Again, we talk about the context of the clubs and the pressure of the clubs you're playing for. It feels like there's so much that's not certain with this Madrid team at the moment. To say claiming the place and holding it down are two, I don't know, they're two different things, but certainly stepping into a pressured occasion and rising to it. And as Andy says, not just rising to the football, but rising to being wound up as well.
He's put himself in the mix for sure. And I mean, what I'm thinking immediately is, with Real Madrid, he's always going to get opportunities, even when everyone's fit. And now he's put his hat in the ring because they just play so many games. Yeah. They want to play to the end in all of those competitions. And normally they can play to the end in all of those competitions. The thing I'm thinking about, Nicky, is if you think of the influence that David Alaba had on Alphonso Davies at Bayern, and arguably Alphonso Davies has never been quite the same player since Alaba left, actually. I wonder how beneficial the games that Asencio gets next to Alaba when Alaba returns from injury, that could help him go on even a level further, couldn't it?
I mean, that feels like maybe the thing that is missing at Madrid in general at the moment is people putting their arms around each other and helping each other. The lack of togetherness feels like, maybe again that's outside perspective, and perhaps that wouldn't be borne out if you were in the changing room. I think we always draw our narratives like I say, but it feels like that team is not all rowing in the same direction at the moment. So I sort of agree with you, and also sort of don't know if that will happen, because it doesn't feel like that's happening a lot.
Well, I guess it's Alaba, really, isn't it? Because one of the things we noticed the most during COVID is, we'd learned pretty quickly what average spectacle a lot of football is when there's no fans in the stadium. But you also find out what players are the loudest. And you found out that about Alaba. Like, never stops talking during the game. I can't explain how valuable that would be for a player like that.
I think that's one of those things that just quietly is true of football at literally all levels, isn't it? I think if you've played any competitive football in a team of 11 players, good communicators make such a big difference on the pitch. Having one or two, like keeping the team together.
But he's like an authentic like coach on the pitch. You know, when you can see players who you know will be great coaches if they want it. Alaba definitely falls into that category.
Bringing us back to the question before, one of the things that's come up with Pereira at Sporting, one of the kickbacks has been about him not being allowed to take on this role because, of course, he hasn't got his pro licenses. In Portugal, players aren't allowed to start those badges until they finish playing. So you're not allowed to start doing it ahead of time and get ready. And so you actually are forced into this gap between end of career. But that whole coach on the pitch, coach on the sidelines thing is... just put me in mind of that.
The last thing you want on the pitch is somebody taking his coaching badges and telling you how to play the game when you're on his side. Anyway, I would have thought. But Lance on Blue Sky asked, after watching the brilliant performance of Samuel Chukwueze against Sassuolo in the Cup this week, is it a shame that we see his talent so rarely displayed on a consistent basis? Not a bad question, I would have thought.
Well... It's a shame that we don't see Samuel Chukwueze's talent on a more regular basis, but I don't know if I'm being too harsh. I tend to think that the reason we don't see that is because Samuel Chukwueze doesn't show us his talent on a regular basis. You could certainly make an argument that, yes, at Milan he's squeezed for playing time, and Christian Pulisic playing as well as he has made it hard for him to get into the team, but he's been there for a year and a half now, and he's played enough that we could have more than 4 goals in total across Serie A and the Champions League. So yes, you can score 2 goals in the Coppa Italia against the Serie B team, and you can score some really punchy, meaningful goals at big moments, like the one he scored against Newcastle in the Champions League last season, which was another of those moments where you felt like, okay, maybe it's about to wake up and we're going to see this guy show us for real. But I don't think at this point I'm willing to absolve him completely of responsibility and not having shown us more.
Well, while we're talking about exciting lefties, I want to ask you about Sassuolo, because we don't normally talk about Serie B on here. Obviously, they took a bit of a hiding this week, but have started the Serie B season very well. And a huge part of that is the fact that they've been able to hold on to their major players. Now, the big one, Domenico Berardi, obviously he was injured as the season started, and he's come back, so that's why he didn't make the move. But why hasn't, say, Christian Torsvet or Arno Loriente got a move elsewhere? Yeah,
some of it will come down to players and their agents, but a big part of the picture is that Sassuolo aren't compelled to sell like other clubs who get relegated are. They've got this financial setup because they have the Mapei money that really doesn't force them into these positions of needing to make decisions for financial obligations. And I think it's clearly a testament to the leadership of the club that they've managed to persuade players to want to hang around, because getting relegated, I think those players absolutely could have kicked up enough a stink. They would have got those transfers. But I guess they made the case to them that, look, we are financially stable, we are planning to go straight back up, and Domenico's staying, so we're going to have him around as soon as he's back from his injury, which of course he is now. I think all those things add up to a big part of it.
As always is the case, I've left the most contentious question till last, because we're going to need a lot of time on this one. This is from Jones on X. Who are your favourite number 10s that you've seen this season? Like I say, this is going to take a while. So should we start with you, Nicky?
Well, it's just, as soon as I get questions about number 10s, I always go to this question in my own head, which is where I get tripped up of, what is a number 10 in 2024? Because I think if you'd asked me a decade ago, I would have been like, okay, number 10 is Wesley Sneijder, Dennis Bergkamp, like that player who sits in the hole, and I understand that very clearly. I think now I lean much more towards this Italian idea of there is the tre quarti, there is the 3 quarters, which is that between midfield and attack. And that kind of goes across the line. It's not just someone sat in the middle of that, because football tactical shapes don't really look like that anymore. So I'm asking myself, even someone we talked about on the main show this week, would Marmoush count as a number 10? Is he enough in that space of between midfield and attack to bring into this conversation?
That license to roam.
Yeah.
Even if you see them doing good work in wide areas, sometimes they might be on the left, sometimes they might be in the right.
License to Roma, given the Italian context.
And I can give you an easy answer, which is I'm not even going to pick one of them, but just whoever's lined up at number 10 for Atalanta at any given moment, Charles de Ketelaere and Ademola Lookman. I want both of them because they are so much fun to watch. Lookman's an outrageous football. I don't know how we didn't see the best of him when he was playing in England, perhaps, but he has matured into something
exactly
really.
why we didn't see the best of him when he was playing in England, because people didn't know what to do with him. He was at Charlton, and I thought, ooh.
That hits the subject of what a number 10 is flush on the head, doesn't it? And especially in an English context, we've not really produced players like that over the years. We had a discussion on the Ramble yesterday about what Shay Given said earlier in the week about he felt that Jack Grealish is wasted out on the left, and he's a generational talent, I think he said, who should be in the centre of the pitch. And sometimes we're not really brave enough to do that. I think English football has got better like that. And if you look at the success of Luka Modric, who is not really an out-and-out number 10, but David Silva in particular, players who have really defined the Premier League to a certain extent, who, if you go back 10 years, there is no way they would get stuck in a central position, or they would be allowed to roam into a central position. So I guess it is about that sort of flexibility, really. I mean, straight away, I think Florian Wirtz, because 10 on the back of the shirt and 10 by nature are two different things. I thought that when you were talking about Dovbyk on the main show yesterday as a number 9, because of course he wears the 11, but he is a number 9, isn't he? But Wirtz has started this season in Ballon d'Or form. If Marmoush isn't the best player in the Bundesliga, as we were discussing again yesterday, then it's Wirtz. I think it probably is Wirtz, to be perfectly honest. Now, there was consternation last weekend when he didn't start the game for Leverkusen at Union, and João Alonso had to come out and calm the game and say, look, I can't play him every single game. And I sat down and explained this to him afterwards. And I said, this is exactly what's going to happen. You're not going to play because you need a rest, but then I'm going to bring you on a little bit later and you're going to absolutely kill the other team. And that's what he did. And it was one of my favourite goals I've seen this season, actually, the winner that Leverkusen scored at Union, where it's a perfect pass. And actually not the sort of, the sort of through the heart of the defence pass that sometimes we expect to see from a number 10. But Wirtz drifting into this right-hand side, playing in a nice such an early cross that it was almost Beckham-esque, really. And Patrick Schick being Patrick Schick, another one who is a number 9 but can do some of the number 10 stuff. He's just like, well, I could knock this in with my left foot. I could head it in. You know what? I'm going to chest it in because I'm that good. And he just puffs out his chest and chests it in from a range where he should not be able to chest it in from, because he's got that much talent. It is an unbelievable goal. So Wirtz and to a lesser extent, Schick going there. The one for me this season, though, and again, you have to sort of caveat it with the roamingness of it, which I think is the whole part of being number 10, Ryan Cherki. Because Cherki is a player who is in a very particular situation. He's been touted since he was 16 years old as being, one of France's best players going forward. Of course, as we've discussed, Nicky, he could also play for Italy or Algeria, or either play for Italy or Algeria if he wanted to. But the skill has always been there, and it is an uncommon skill that he has. That sort of old cliche about he could dribble around you in a phone box. He definitely could. But it's never really translated into proper football. He's had little moments, but he's looked like an unbelievably talented child before. Someone who he dribbles in the wrong places. He chooses to pass in the wrong places. It's all a bit too improvised. But actually, this season, it feels like it's been a pivotal point for him, because he was really close to going to PSG in the summer. didn't work out. Close to going to Dortmund, didn't work out. Then you have Crystal Palace, Fulham approaching him, and he's like, no. If I'm going to leave here, I want to go big. And so he agrees to sign this extended contract with Lyon. His season debut is delayed while he actually does sign that contract. And then he makes an impact straight away. And it's as if the whole thing has made him grow up. He has been brilliant so far this season. Goals, assists, but really what he does, you can't really quantify in those basic numbers, because his ability to open the game up by dribbling round players with either foot, with the ball tricks he uses on the pitch that other players wouldn't even think of using in a proper game, even if they were capable of doing it. He can become an extraordinary player. Now, look, he's been linked to Liverpool as well, and there are people out there saying, well, I'll be really disappointed if he's a Mo Salah replacement. He's nothing like Mo Salah. So you look at him as left-footed, and he's often cutting from the right, and again talking about number 10 type players, and do they get shifted out to wide positions. Shirky can play on either wing. I think he's better in the centre, because Salah is direct. He is a wide forward. Shirky is a playmaker. He can score, but he will score as a byproduct of his brilliance rather than because that is one of his main functions. He's much better at the pass, opening the space up for other players, and the way he can, I suppose, unbalance other teams with the extraordinary ability he's got. I think if he carries on like he started this season, because of that two-footedness, he's a slightly different player. He could become the player that people have always wanted Ousmane Dembélé to become.
I just because I don't want to miss them. Didn't say De Ketelaere before. He's very different to Lookman, but I love his style as well. I think Lookman's the better player, but I think De Ketelaere brings something very unique. It's that Mesut Ozil way of carrying the ball that's just a bit different. Also, though, we haven't said, and I think he qualifies, Rafinha.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think qualifies as, in my mind, a number 10 in this era. He comes inside a lot. Sometimes he just lines up in the middle, doesn't he? So I think he absolutely would fit in that. And this is, of course, before we even touch on the Premier League. And as an Arsenal fan, would have to say Martin Odegaard as well, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
I thought you'd already said the Arsenal bit when you mentioned Mesut Ozil, but if you want
to,
he's a totally different one, isn't he? Because he's got Odegaard's got the craft of a number 10, but he's so modern because of the way he presses. And he was trained, if you think of him like joining Real Madrid when he was a kid, as a totally different player. And I think that goes to show when you buy extremely talented teenagers, you've no idea how they're going to turn out. Like many times they're not able to fulfill their potential, but other times, like Odegaard, they're able to become something that like you would never have imagined them becoming.
I did fetch another 10 minutes to discuss this, but
I think we could be here for another hour if you wanted to see.
On another occasion. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC. If you'd like to ask a question, you can contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, at Nicky Bandini, or at OTC Pod. And you can email us, otc@footballramble.com.